reflect on the feedback from the class last night and the difficulties that came up when trying to work with data sets. For the final, we're just going to look at this assessment evaluation sheet. The things that you will need to look at are going to be given to you, and it will consist of this table here, which will be filled out. You won't have to compile anything. I'm not really concerned about your ability to add. And then also 3 different student artifacts that represent the different kinds of students you might have in your class. Each student's work is going to represent about a third of the class, roughly. And so, for example, I have Sean Hunter, I have Corey Matthews, and I have Topanga Lawrence. You may recognize these people from Boy Meets World fame, right? Or Girl Meets World, I suppose. The idea here is that Topanga is going to be representing the strong students. Corey is going to be representing the kind of middle of the roads students who have some issues, but they're not super pervasive. And then Sean Hunter is really the struggling kind of student. And we're going to just pretend that the class is divided into third, and these are representative. So Sean is representative of all the struggling students with the issues that they're having. Okay. Now, the first part of this assessment is just looking at how did people do in the class on these different objectives, right? This will be given to you how many students fall into each category. What you will have to do is interpret that. Again, I talked in class about this general approach to it. State the objective, first objective, defining an author's purpose, and then tell me how many people or how many students or what percentage of students met or exceeded, then break that down into 3s and 4s, and then tell me how many students out of the total student population did not meet the standard, and break that down into 2s and 1s. Then do the same thing for the second objective and the same thing for the third. It's pretty basic. I'm expecting everybody to do really well on this. I don't expect there to be any issues. The more complicated part will be identifying the qualitative patterns, right? And so you will have to go through objective 1, objective 2, and objective 3. Now, in this case, you will be referring back to these distributions to kind of get a feel of how people did on different particular skills. But then you'll be looking at the actual data to try to figure out, well, what's going on. Now, when I look at this assessment, right, objective 1 is represented on the top. There are 3 definitions, 3 terms. They just have to match them up. Sean, in this case, has informing and persuading mixed up. Entertaining is okay. When we look at then the second section, which is looking at a paragraph and trying to identify what purpose it was written for, right? We're looking at Sean's, he only got 1 right. There's only 1 that's supposed to be entertaining. His first one is supposed to be persuading. This is supposed to be persuading as well. This is supposed to be informational, and then persuading. So it actually is interesting that he mixed up the 2 things here, and he is also consistently mixing them up down here. These bottom 4 should just be switched back and forth between the I and P, and then they would be all right. So that's the kind of mistake that he's making. He's confused, and he might have a misconception like that when you're informing somebody, you're telling them about something, and when you're trying to persuade them, you're trying to introduce them to an idea or something like that. Not sure. Again, this is made up stuff. The last page is they're supposed to write a paragraph, 4 sentences long, for each type of purpose. So you have Sean saying that he went to Chubby's and had a wild time. Friend Corey and him ate their favorite food, which is a Chubby burger. It was good. It was crazy, right? Okay, so purpose, yeah, he's got the entertaining idea right. Mechanics are terrible. Good voice and some good descriptors, but the mechanics are just terrible, right? So really it's more not about the purpose, but writing a paragraph. If we look at the second one, right, the kind of problems that he's having kind of hits the purpose, maybe. It sounds like he's trying to convince, right? They're only $1 and you know that's a deal. It's saying it's good, so it's kind of sounding like they're trying to persuade you that Chubby burgers are great. Then when we get down to the inform, this is clearly an attempt to persuade. Let me tell you why you should eat a chubby burger. It's cheap, it's tasty, you should eat one. Not a lot going on. Mechanics are bad, no purpose, no topic sentence, no real details. So bad across the board, right? Then we would also look at, say, Corey's work and try to figure out what he's doing. And we'd see that, well, he's approaching the standard in some areas, right? His entertaining is pretty good, his informing is pretty good, but his persuasive, just like if we looked at his responses here and somehow they disappeared, I'll get them back when I upload it. He makes that same kind of mistake here where he gets everything pretty accurate, but he misses the 3 persuasion ones. And so he's having a hard time with persuading. If we look at Topanga, she gets everything right. Again, I don't know what happened to all their answers on the first page, so I'm going to have to figure that out. But if we look at her paragraphs, she gets full points on everything, right? They're good entertaining, good persuasion, good transitions, good details, topic sentences, and so on. And so advice to her would be about how to get better, or how to maybe mix different types of purposes to add humor to persuasion, things like that. So when we get down to the qualitative patterns, for each objective, you're going to basically describe what's going on. So for objective 1 in this case, I am stating based on this data up here that students did well in this objective. When it was not met, it was because inform and persuade were confused. And I could even add here that persuasion was the more challenging type of purpose. Objective 2 then, I again see this issue trying to figure out what persuasive writing is about. Some students confused it with informational writing, and others did not seem to grasp the essential characteristics, meaning Corey. And again, he is representing a third of the students. I also found that if Corey and Sean are representing 2/3 of the class, they both chose this first paragraph about why Halloween is the best holiday in the world. Both of them pick that as entertaining when it's supposed to be persuasive. And now if that's saying 2/3 of the class went that way and made that error, well, that's a pretty consistent thing, and maybe it has something to do with that particular passage. And that's something that I can think about when I think about next steps. For objective 3, I have the issues of mechanics and grammar. In persuasive writing, they had trouble with transitions and arguments. In information, some people had trouble with details, right? Now, the next step for you will be giving feedback, and I'm just going to assign you one student. So in that sense, we're going to look at Corey's in this case, and we're going to go objective by objective and make sure that we tell him what he did well, what he can work on, how he can get better, right? And so for the first one, you did a great job defining each type of author's purpose. Next, and so that is the feedback. He got them all right. Not anything else to say. Next week, we will be looking at having more than one purpose. And so I'm saying in the future, we're going to expand on this idea. Anyway, that's the natural extension. And I'm asking him to think about or consider how different types of purposes can mix in an effective way. In other words, when I'm being persuasive, should I also be entertaining, or should I be more informational, or should I combine all 3, right? That leads to the second one. You also did a good job identifying entertaining informational writing, right? But did not seem to understand the essential characteristics of persuasive writing. Got all of those wrong. So I'm directing him then to review the list of characteristics for persuasive writing and make corrections on the test. Underline the characteristics of each persuasive paragraph and turn that in on Monday. So it's an extra assignment for him, and it's supposed to help him figure out what are those elements about persuasive writing that he's missing or getting wrong. Finally, for objective 3, you did a good job with your paragraphs to entertain and to inform, and you have some spelling and grammar mistakes to fix. Going over the characteristics of persuasive writing might help you write for that purpose. And once you have reviewed the persuasive writing characteristics, we can work on applying those to writing next week. So after he turns in the work for Objective 2, I'm hoping that he will have internalized or learned something about what makes persuasive writing, and then I'm going to use that as a springboard when we start writing with more than one purpose. And then I end with a nice note. I can't wait to see what you come up with. Again, trying to end all the feedback with a positive thing. The final task is using assessment to inform instruction. Based on the assessment data provided, what are the next steps for this class going forward? So, I came up with these three. You could come up with different things. Just make sure that you're thinking about addressing student needs to help everybody move forward. It could be some extensions, it could be some additional supports, and it can even refer back to what you would do differently with this particular class or with this particular lesson if you were teaching it again. So, first one, during next week's instruction on writing with more than one purpose, I'm going to make sure to review the characteristics of persuasive writing. 2/3 of my students seem to be confused on that. I need to make sure I hammer that home. For the second one, when teaching the class in the future, spending more time looking at the qualities of persuasive writings initially, giving them more examples that distinguish it from other types of writing, and focusing on those transitional phrases, which were also an issue. Finally, continue working on indentation, capitalization, punctuation, and allow revisions for student grades to be improved. I would also incorporate test paragraphs, in other words, the paragraphs that they wrote here, as first drafts to write with more than one purpose next week. So in other words, for Sean in particular, we'll say, right, this is his entertaining paragraph. We're going to try to work on that a little bit. My feedback for him would be a little bit different. And then I'm going to use this as a springboard. So if you weren't just trying to be entertaining, you were trying to combine maybe all three of these together, how would you do that? And so I would definitely talk in more detail about what a persuasive paragraph would involve and try to get them to merge. And that way I would hit home on those principles a bit more. So that's it. I will have another example up later in the week. And if you have any questions, we'll take the first 10 or 15 minutes of that exam period to go over any questions or issues that you might have. Additionally, email is always there. I'll open up a discussion board and you can ask me any questions on there as well. All right. Have a great week, and I will see you next week.